The morning Daniel kissed my forehead and walked out the front door before sunrise, I already knew he was lying to me. The sky outside our kitchen window still looked bruised with darkness, and the coffee in my hands had gone cold 5 minutes earlier, but I stood there anyway and watched his car disappear down the wet street like I still believed him. "Emergency board meeting," he had said while fixing his tie in the hallway mirror. "Probably going to be a long day." His voice sounded smooth and practiced, the same way it had sounded for months. I remember nodding slowly while Jamie sat at the counter eating cereal shaped like tiny dolphins, telling me random facts about the ocean before school. "Did you know dolphins sleep with one eye open?" she asked happily. I smiled at her because she deserved smiles that morning. Behind me, Margaret sat quietly at the kitchen table with both hands wrapped around a mug of tea. She didn't look at Daniel once while he spoke. She only watched me, and when the front door finally closed, the silence inside the house felt so sharp, it almost cut through my skin. Margaret lifted her eyes to mine, and there was something heavy hiding inside them. Guilt maybe. Fear too. Neither of us said a word. I met Daniel when I was 26 years old and still believed love could protect people from becoming cruel. Back then he laughed easily and touched my back gently when we crossed streets together. He used to leave handwritten notes inside my purse before work, and I honestly thought I had found the safest place in the world inside our marriage. 5 years later, I was 31 and waking up beside a stranger who treated kindness like an inconvenience, especially toward Margaret. The day she was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis changed something inside him almost immediately. I still remember that dinner because Jamie had spilled apple juice all over the floor while Daniel sat there talking about long-term realities in that cold business tone he used when discussing money. Margaret had looked embarrassed just existing near him. Then Daniel leaned back in his chair and actually said the word burden. I can still hear it sometimes. Burden. Like his own sister was an unpaid bill sitting at the table. I invited her to stay with us that same night before I could stop myself. Daniel smiled tightly at me across the dishes and said, "If that's what you want, Claire." But I knew he hated the idea before the sentence even finished leaving his mouth. The strange thing was that living with Margaret became the easiest part of my life. She was gentle in quiet ways most people never noticed. She folded Jamie's school clothes before I even asked. She remembered everyone's coffee order. Some mornings, her hands shook badly while holding her cane, but she still smiled through it like she was apologizing for taking up space. Jamie adored her instantly. They spent hours watching documentaries about whales and sea turtles while Margaret pretended not to fall asleep halfway through. At night after Jamie went to bed, Margaret and I sometimes sat in the kitchen with tea, while the dishwasher hummed softly behind us. Those became my favorite moments in the house because they felt honest. Daniel was rarely home by then anyway. There was always another dinner, another client event, another late meeting, and then there was Brooke. I found Brooke by accident on a rainy Thursday afternoon while searching our home computer for a restaurant receipt. I still remember how hard my heart started pounding when I opened the wrong folder. 47 emails, 8 months of messages. I only read 6 before my stomach folded in on itself. The words weren't subtle. They talked about hotel rooms and weekends Daniel claimed he spent traveling for work. Brooke sent pictures of herself smiling into mirrors while my husband answered with things he hadn't said to me in years. Beautiful. Miss you already. Can't stop thinking about last night. I closed the laptop so fast my hands hurt afterward. Then I walked upstairs, sat on the edge of our bed, and stared at the wall until the room turned dark around me. I didn't cry. That's the part people never understand when I tell this story. I expected tears too. Instead, something colder settled quietly inside me, like ice sliding beneath a locked door. Jamie was at school. Margaret was at physical therapy. The house felt empty enough to echo. I sat there for 2 hours thinking about my daughter's future and the man downstairs whose shoes still sat beside mine in the closet. After that day, I started noticing things I should have noticed earlier. Daniel smiling at text messages during dinner. The expensive watch he suddenly bought himself. The way Margaret went silent whenever finances came up around him. Once I walked into the living room unexpectedly and saw her closing a folder so quickly, papers slid onto the carpet. Another time I heard her whispering angrily on the phone in the hallway before stopping the second she saw me. "Everything okay?" I asked her. She forced a smile too quickly. "Just insurance paperwork." But something in her voice stayed with me. At night, I began lying awake beside Daniel while he slept peacefully, wondering how many lies a marriage could survive before it stopped being real entirely. Some nights I watched the ceiling until sunrise. Other nights I listened to Jamie breathing softly through the baby monitor we still kept plugged in even though she was 7 now. Children sound safest when they sleep. I think that's why parents stand in doorways watching them sometimes. 6 weeks later, Daniel finally asked for the divorce. It happened on a Sunday afternoon while rain tapped softly against the kitchen windows. Jamie was at a birthday party, and Margaret had fallen asleep upstairs after a difficult morning with her legs. Daniel walked downstairs carrying sparkling water like he was rehearsing confidence. "I think we should talk," he said carefully. I already knew exactly what conversation he wanted. Still, I sat across from him at the table and folded my hands calmly in my lap. He talked for almost 20 minutes straight, about growing apart, about wanting happiness, about how sometimes relationships naturally end. He spoke like a man delivering a presentation at work, polished and emotionally distant. Not once did he mention Brooke. Not once did he admit the truth. When he finally stopped speaking, the kitchen felt strangely small around us. "Okay," I said quietly. He blinked hard like he expected screaming instead. "I don't want to fight either," I continued. "I'm willing to keep things simple." Relief flashed across his face so quickly it almost made me sick. Then I gave him the condition that changed everything. "I want Margaret to come with me." For a second, Daniel actually laughed. Not cruelly exactly, more shocked than anything else. "Claire," he said slowly, "you're serious?" I nodded once. "I won't fight over the house. I won't touch your business assets. I just want reasonable support for Jamie, and I want Margaret with me." The room went completely silent after that. I watched him thinking, really thinking, calculating medication costs, future care, wheelchairs, specialists, insurance. Every number moved behind his eyes like a machine working overtime. Finally, he leaned back in his chair and rubbed his jaw. "You understand her condition is going to get worse." "I understand. And that's really all you want?" I looked directly at him then. "That's all I want." The relief that flooded his face was instant. It almost looked joyful. He agreed so quickly it stole the air from my lungs. 4 days later, we signed the separation papers, and Daniel shook my hand across the lawyer's office table like he had just negotiated the best deal of his life. What he didn't understand yet was that Margaret had been hiding something much heavier than fear inside that quiet little folder upstairs. And 3 nights after we moved into our tiny apartment across town, she finally opened it in front of me. Margaret's hands were trembling when she placed the folder on our tiny kitchen table, but her voice stayed strangely calm. Jamie had already fallen asleep in the next room with one of her whale documentaries still playing softly on the television. Rain pressed gently against the apartment windows while the yellow kitchen light made everything feel smaller and more honest somehow. I remember sitting across from Margaret with my chest tight before she even opened the folder, because deep down, I already knew whatever was inside had been hurting her for a very long time. "I should have told you sooner," she whispered. Her fingers tightened around the papers like they weighed 100 pounds. "I was scared, Claire." I looked at her cane leaning against the table and saw how exhausted she looked all at once. Not physically, spiritually, like fear had been sitting on her shoulders for months. "You can tell me now," I said softly. She nodded once. Then she opened the folder, and my entire understanding of my marriage cracked open beside it. The documents inside were financial records from Daniel's company, spreadsheets, transfers, fake invoices, hidden accounts. At first, the numbers blurred together in front of me because my brain refused to catch up with what my eyes were seeing. Margaret slowly explained everything while I turned page after page with shaking hands. Daniel had been moving company money into private accounts for nearly 2 years. He'd hidden losses from investors and manipulated reports before meetings. There were fake expense claims connected to luxury trips and expensive gifts. I recognized one payment immediately because the amount matched the bracelet Brooke wore in a picture from one of the emails. My stomach twisted so hard I thought I might throw up right there on the kitchen floor. "His business partner doesn't know," Margaret said quietly. "Russell Hargrove thinks the company is struggling because of market changes." I stared at her. "And Daniel threatened you over this?" She lowered her eyes immediately. That silence answered everything before she even spoke. "He said if I talked, he'd cut me off his insurance plan." Her voice cracked badly then. "He said my treatments were already costing too much." Something inside me broke hearing that sentence. Not loudly, quietly, like glass splitting under pressure. I didn't sleep at all that night. After Margaret went to bed, I sat alone in the dark kitchen while the refrigerator hummed softly behind me. I kept staring at the folder spread across the table while memories replayed themselves differently now. Daniel buying expensive watches. Daniel suddenly insisting we couldn't afford certain medical treatments for Margaret. Daniel disappearing on business trips while Jamie asked why Daddy missed another school recital. Every lie connected itself slowly into one ugly picture. Around 3 in the morning, I heard tiny footsteps behind me. Jamie walked into the kitchen wrapped in her blanket, rubbing her sleepy eyes. "Mom?" she whispered. I quickly closed the folder. "Bad dream?" She nodded and climbed into my lap without another word. I held her tightly against my chest while she fell back asleep there, warm and trusting and completely innocent of the mess adults create around children. And sitting there with my daughter asleep in my arms, I realized something clearly for the first time. Daniel wasn't just selfish. He was dangerous. The next morning, I called a lawyer named Patricia Osei. One of my coworkers had mentioned her months earlier during an office lunch and joked that Patricia could make grown men cry in conference rooms. I met her 2 days later in a downtown office that smelled faintly like coffee and old paper. Margaret came with me despite barely being able to manage the stairs that morning. Patricia read every single document without interrupting us once. Her face barely changed while she worked, but I noticed the way her jaw tightened occasionally. When she finally looked up, the room felt unbearably still. "Your husband committed serious financial fraud," she said bluntly. Hearing someone else say it out loud made my chest ache in a completely different way. Patricia asked Margaret several careful questions about how she found the records and whether Daniel ever threatened her directly. Margaret answered everyone honestly, even when her voice shook. Finally, Patricia leaned back in her chair and folded her hands together. "If we move forward," she said carefully, "this is going to explode his entire life." I remember staring at the window behind her for several seconds before answering. "He already exploded mine." Everything moved fast after that. Patricia contacted regulators. Russell Hargrove received copies of the financial evidence. Investigators started reviewing company accounts. Within 10 days, Daniel called me 23 times. I counted. I ignored every single one until he finally showed up outside the apartment building one Thursday evening, just as Jamie and I were getting home from the grocery store. The second I saw him standing near the entrance, Jamie froze beside me. "Go upstairs to Margaret," I told her quietly. "Now." She looked nervous but obeyed immediately. Daniel watched her disappear inside before turning toward me with a face I barely recognized anymore. Angry, panicked. "What the hell did you do?" he snapped. I kept both grocery bags in my hands because somehow setting them down felt too vulnerable. "I told the truth." He laughed bitterly and stepped closer. "You're trying to ruin me." "No," I said calmly. "You ruined yourself." For a second I thought he might yell again, but instead his whole expression changed into something desperate. "Claire, please." That word shocked me more than the anger did. "Please. You don't understand how bad this could get." I stared at him for a long moment while cold wind moved through the parking lot around us. "Did you understand how bad it got for Margaret when you threatened her treatments?" His face drained of color instantly. The investigation lasted for months. Long, exhausting months filled with legal meetings and paperwork, and tense weekends when Jamie returned from visiting Daniel unusually quiet. Sometimes I sat awake after everyone else slept, wondering how my life had changed so completely in less than a year. But little by little, peace started growing inside our apartment anyway. Jamie decorated Margaret's walker with tiny ocean stickers one afternoon and laughed so hard she nearly fell off the couch. Margaret started teaching Jamie how to play card games at the kitchen table every Sunday morning. I found myself smiling again without forcing it. Real smiles. The kind that arrive before you even notice them. Then one afternoon, Jamie came home from school upset because another child had asked why her parents didn't live together anymore. She climbed onto my bed that night and whispered, "Did Dad stop loving us?" I swear my heart physically hurt hearing those words. I brushed her hair back slowly and said the only honest thing I knew. "Your dad loves you very much. But sometimes adults make selfish choices, and those choices hurt people." Jamie thought quietly for a moment before asking, "Is that why Aunt Margaret cries sometimes when she thinks nobody sees?" Tears burned my eyes instantly. Children notice everything. Daniel eventually lost almost everything he'd built. Russell Hargrove filed a civil lawsuit. Investors pulled out. Brooke disappeared from his life the second the scandal became public. Patricia later told me Brooke refused to answer calls from reporters and quietly transferred to another company across the state. Daniel called me one final time nearly a year after our divorce. I almost didn't answer, but something inside me needed closure. His voice sounded exhausted when I picked up, older somehow. "I used to think you destroyed my life," he admitted quietly, "but I think I did that myself long before you left." I sat silently at the kitchen table while afternoon sunlight poured through the apartment windows. Margaret and Jamie were laughing together in the other room over a card game. The sound drifted softly through the hallway. "I hope you become someone Jamie can be proud of someday," I said finally. Daniel didn't answer for several seconds. Then he whispered, "Me too." A year later, our apartment no longer felt temporary. It felt like home. Margaret's health still had difficult days, but she smiled more now than she used to. Jamie turned 9 and became obsessed with beluga whales after watching another documentary. She spent weeks explaining whale communication to anyone willing to listen. Some evenings, the three of us cooked dinner together while music played softly from Margaret's old radio. Other nights, we sat near the window during thunderstorms drinking tea while Jamie talked endlessly about the ocean. The peace inside those ordinary moments healed parts of me I thought were gone forever. One Sunday morning, I stood quietly in the kitchen making coffee while Margaret accused Jamie of cheating at cards again. Jamie laughed so loudly the sound filled the whole apartment. I leaned against the counter and listened carefully because happiness sounds different when you almost lost it once. Softer, more precious, more alive. And sometimes I still think about the moment Daniel shook my hand during the divorce agreement, the relief in his eyes, the way he believed he had escaped consequences cleanly. He thought Margaret was a burden I was foolish enough to carry away for him. But he never understood the truth hiding inside that frightened woman with the cane. He never understood that protecting someone kind can change the entire direction of your life. I didn't save Margaret alone. In a strange way, she saved me too. She handed me the truth when I needed it most, and the truth gave me something far more valuable than revenge. It gave me peace. It gave Jamie a safer childhood. It gave our little apartment warmth and honesty and laughter again. And in the end, those things mattered more than the house, the money, or the marriage Daniel destroyed with his own hands. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe for more emotional stories.